All right, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the end of season broadcast. I'm Jim Williams. I'm here with Bill Phillips tonight. We broadcast together all year, every year, covering hurricanes all over the Atlantic Basin. And this was a basic season of two storms, in my opinion. We had 15 named storms. The projections for this season were to have maybe anywhere from, what did Noah predict, Bill? Do you remember, Bill Phillips? Good evening.
Good evening. I think they were in the range of as low as 10 and as high as 16.
Okay, and so then Phil Klotzback, I should have had this ready for the show tonight, but I'm running around here.
I'll get that in just a second. Hang on.
My projections were 11 to 13. We ended up with 15 named storms, and it came down to two big storms this year, and that was Florence that hit North Carolina on September 14th, and Hurricane Michael, which hit the Panhandle on October 10th. So what we're going to do tonight is basically go over these two storms because those were the two big stories of the hurricane season. Bill, to start out the evening tonight, give me your thoughts on, in a paragraph, just give me a paragraph of your thoughts on this hurricane season.
I'm mentally, for only really doing two storms, I'm mentally and physically exhausted. Those two storms, given the fact they were both majors, and I understand Florence weakened in the end, but the wind wasn't the story with Florence. We'll get into that was a rainmaker, but 6 to 7 years of hard work and dedication with the live video streaming that you and I have worked tirelessly at this for almost 7 years with the video aspect to do it from the road, and it was nailed in almost every facet.
Right.
That's what I'll take from it. You could not draw it up any better than what was presented and how it was pulled off.
Aggravation followed by almost depression, followed by
exhilaration.
Not exhilaration. I don't want to use that word, and the reason is because a lot of people died this hurricane season. Not maybe not as many as would die from like a major earthquake or a tsunami or something like that, but we still had over 100 people die, I believe, between these two storms alone. And there may have been more if you add up all the storms this season, there may have been some odds and ends people killed, maybe in some of the tropical storms in the islands down there. But there's people that attended funerals. There's people that lost everything they have. Mexico Beach to Panama City, many people had their homes wiped out. They're going to be reeling for a long time. Now, I was just watching Richard Horodner's version of Hurricane Michael. Now, Richard Horodner is a longtime storm chaser, friend of the late Jim Leonard, and he was in Panama City, just northeast of my location during the storm. He did not get in the eye, but he was filming from his hotel, and then his chase partner took his vehicle, apparently, raced into Mexico Beach, and he lost the vehicle in Mexico Beach, but he managed to get some unbelievable video. I was watching it just tonight. I just got it now, and I was watching it before we came on air. And that video that he shot is unbelievable, showing the storm surge coming into Mexico Beach. There's homes floating by. He's on the second floor filming. There's homes blowing by. There's cars. There's boats. Everything just floating by. And when I say floating, I'm talking at a pretty good brisk pace. It's not just drifting by. They're moving because the wind is so strong. It's pushing everything inland from the Gulf of Mexico.
Wow.
This is just unbelievable video. And then, of course, he used my video from Callaway that I was shooting, and he really did a good job capturing that as well and putting music and score in the background. And the good thing about his videos is he puts a lot of radars and satellites and recon data in his videos. So he kind of tells the whole story of how the system developed, how it moved inland, and what happened. So Richard Horodner, just Google that name, Richard Horodner. All right, let's start with Florence because since we're talking about the two big storms this year, Florence was the big one. Now, I I predicted my predictions came out on May 15th, and I predicted the Carolinas were going to be impacted this year. That was the top area of the United States. My number one was Wilmington. So we
Mhm.
had this hurricane heading towards North Carolina as a Category 4 hurricane. Everybody was batting down the hatches. We thought this was going to be a Category 4 coming into to Wilmington, Morehead City area. Uh,
My
everybody,
area absolutely freaked out.
yeah. You now tell us what did your area go through exactly? Were you under an evacuation? What were you going to do?
They evacuated Zone A, which is basically the areas right near the water, the lowest of the low line. But they shut down the schools. They shut down. There was no bus transit from Wednesday afternoon through Sunday through Sunday through Saturday. They didn't resume
Okay, now
anything.
let me
It,
interrupt you. The you said Wednesday afternoon the buses stopped running. How many days is that? How long is that before the hurricane arrived on shore?
wasn't that wasn't Florence? Wasn't that Friday afternoon?
Well, whatever the 14th is of September. I mean, you were there. Like, how many days before it arrived? I mean, was there a hurricane
I think it
watch?
was day and a half, almost 2 days.
So were you under a hurricane watch at the time?
No, we did not get. We were just under tropical storm watch. They did not. They jumped the gun on everything. We never got under hurricane watch here.
Okay, so are you trying to tell me they shut the mass transit system down when they didn't even have a hurricane watch up for your area?
That's correct.
That's just terrible. That's just unacceptable.
The storm missed me by 200 miles, and
How
they
are people
shut.
supposed to get around?
You don't.
That's ridiculous. They should at least keep it up while there's a hurricane watch, and then once it turns to a warning and they know for sure it's coming in there,
Get out of
then
here.
then they can shut everything off. I understand that, but when there's a watch out or not even a watch and they have it shut down, that's just terrible.
We had a tropical storm watch and a warning. I could understand maybe shutting it down Thursday night, Friday, and maybe Saturday to give everybody a break, but not Wednesday night at the close of business.
All right, so here's what happened as Florence was approaching. From my perspective down here, and leads into my second comment on my opening paragraph of comments about the season. The depression part happened for me because I had a bad year this year with very close friends passing away. I had three within a year's period. I had three close friends pass away. Not close, but one close and two that I knew really well, and they suddenly passed away. And they were all, well, two of them were young, and one of them was kind of up there, past 65. But I was attending funerals, and in between the funerals, believe it or not, there was a couple of weddings. So I could literally say I could have a movie called three funerals, two weddings, and a Category 4. Like that was my year, like in a nutshell. Two weddings, but my niece and my nephew were married this season, and then I attended two funerals in between those two hurricanes. Yeah, in between the two hurricanes. And as Florence was approaching, I had just attended the funeral of the company that I run a business that does blacktop work. That's how I make my living. And so the place I buy my material, the woman was 51 years old, and she suddenly had a heart attack and died. And this was and I've known this family for like 30, 40 years, and her name was Cindy, and I knew her really, really well. And so I had to attend this funeral, and it happened to be the weekend that Hurricane Florence was
Florence.
approaching North Carolina. And I was going to head up there, and Bill and I were going to cover this thing. We covered it anyways. We covered this hurricane making landfall. We did our live broadcast on the internet like we always do, and we were showing live webcams and radars and radio feeds and all this stuff and toggling back and forth. And Bill did an excellent job. So let's pull up some images from Hurricane Florence and kind of go through some of these images and explain to people what we were doing at the time and what was happening as these hurricanes were making landfall. So let's start with the screen share over here. There's my desktop, by the way, folks. That is courtesy of the HER-Track program. It allows me to see a current satellite picture on my desktop. Pretty cool thing. All right,
That
so here,
that updates what, every 30 minutes?
I think, yeah, it's about every 15, 30 minutes. I'm not sure. The hurricane made landfall as a Category 1, but it brought the major conditions in on the coast of North Carolina, such as the heavy rains and the storm surge. We saw upwards of almost 40 inches of rain in some of these canals and waterways in eastern North Carolina. And I know it says 30 inches there, but this was preceding the eventual rainfall that would fall in the whole general area. And it's
There
spread
were
into South
isolated
Carolina.
spots of 38 to 40 that were measured. We know that.
Yeah, yeah. Tremendous amount of rain. So this was a story of, it wasn't about much about the wind. Now, there was some good wind. I don't know if you saw Derek Sibley's video,
I did.
Bill, from Hurricane Florence. He did a pretty good job. He was up there filming, and he filmed a gas station canopy flipping over and blowing away. Like normally you catch them blowing apart or blowing over. You normally don't catch them getting dragged by the wind down the street. So that was pretty neat. There was a lot of power lines bouncing around and power poles, but I mean, it was nowhere close to the wind devastation that was in Hurricane Michael, but it was still pretty intense for a Category 1. But the big story from Florence was the rain and the storm surge flooding. Yeah, this is the from the HER-Track program, and this is Florence as it was approaching on September 14th at around midnight, and the system is moving in, and inside that red circle are the hurricane force winds, and we were streaming live at the time, and we had a webcam going from I think it was from Cape Lookout, or it was near Morehead City somewhere, I believe, and there were hurricane flags blowing, and you could see the wind just blowing from left to right, completely horizontal winds, tremendous amounts of wind coming into Morehead City. Now, what was interesting about this hurricane, I think I have more graphics to show this, is the hurricane force wind field extended way to the north and way to the south. It was bigger than Michael when it made landfall, but the winds were equally as strong in Morehead City as they were in Wilmington, North Carolina.
And we can be thankful that this weakened down to a Category 1, because can you imagine Category 2 or 3 conditions, or 4 had it come in? This thing was in no hurry to go anywhere.
Right. Yeah, it was creeping at, Bill, it was moving at 6 miles per hour when it moved in.
The speed of my wheelchair, to put that in perspective.
Yeah, and to me, I keep thinking that thing hauls ass. I don't know why. I always think that chair is flying. But 6 miles an hour is like a fast pace,
Whoa.
like a slow jog.
Yep.
And as it creeped on shore, it just meandered around, and it took like 24 to 36 hours to get out of the area, and it just kept dumping. The feeder bands kept coming in and dumping rain and dumping. And if you can see here, looking at the recon messages, the hurricane hunters flew out there right up until landfall. Here we were at 9:58 out over the water. I'm going to annotate this. We had 9:58 out in here, and then it remained about 958 millibars all through here, and then it creeped up to 959 millibars, so it was slightly weakening, and then, of course, it went right over Wilmington and dipped off to the southwest. It was right around 960 millibars at landfall, but notice these barbs up here. From all the way up here, these are 80-mile-an-hour winds to all the way down here south of Wilmington, 80-mile-per-hour winds. So that was a large swath of 80-mile-an-hour winds, with gusts to 90 in some cases as this moved on shore.
I'm going to say it again. Florence proves you cannot always go by a category.
Yeah, exactly.
I'll let you in on a little inside baseball. We don't always do Category 1s as far as live streaming, because you don't get hurricane conditions out of them most of the time. It's usually a category. If it's a Category 2, you get Category 1 conditions. Category 3, you get Category 2, and so on. So Category 1s, we don't always touch them, but this was the exception, is my point.
Well, and the other reason we covered it is because, well, for two reasons. First of all, we couldn't be there, so we both felt bad about it. And the
Yeah.
second thing was this was a major hurricane for a long time, and it was treated like a major hurricane, even though some people came back thinking, oh, well, it's not major anymore, I'm going to come back.
Wrong.
It was the wrong thing to do. It was still carrying all the major impacts of a major hurricane. So we
It had a
decided to
major
cover it.
surge with it.
Yeah, so we decided to cover it like it was a major hurricane. And for all intents and purposes, it was, excluding the wind. But look at this worksheet from the HurTrack program. This is the Hurricane Florence as it is approaching. Notice here in the lower right-hand corner where the green area is, this is a 25 nautical mile wide eye with an eye wall that's 12 miles thick. So it was 12 miles north of the center and 12 miles south of the center of, so basically a 24-mile swath of those sustained hurricane force winds, that eye wall wind field, which are very intense winds, even though they 80 mile an hour range. Some of those gusts were 90, 95, even some gusts up just short of 100 miles per hour in some
So
cases.
if you extrapolate that out, with say it's moving at 6 miles an hour, 6, 12, 18, 20, 24. So that's 4 hours of the core beating the hell out of you.
Right. Yep.
That's a lot of time. By comparison, when the storm moves faster, Michael was about 90 minutes doing his damage.
And look at the winds, expanse of the winds as this was making landfall. Look in here. We had the hurricane force wind field expanding out 100 miles to the northwest of the center, 140 miles to the southwest of the center, 150 miles to the southeast of the center, and 170 miles northeast of the center. So those hurricane force wind gusts were way out there. So this was a prolonged event, adding to the 6 mile an hour forward speed, made this just a devastating hurricane for a lot of people in North Carolina, simply because of the slow movement of the system and the large wind field.
Yep.
Okay, so
and they do that up here a lot because they're interacting with fronts or they're interacting with a high pressure, and the wind field expands as it comes up against the front or butts up against the high pressure.
Exactly.
Either or. I mean, it's classic. They almost always expand the further north they get.
So here's a picture of the water vapor image of Hurricane Florence approaching North Carolina. And I drew the arrow to indicate the dry air that was being ingested into the system from the United States. This is typical of a lot of systems moving into the Northeast, the Mid-Atlantic, and the Northern Gulf lately. We've seen all these storms, no matter how intense they are, as they're approaching, for whatever reason, the dry air gets sucked into the system and it weakens as it moves on shore. And this happened with Florence, and that's why we were making some assumptions about Michael early on. Bill and I were consulting about going and getting Hurricane Michael, getting up there and filming it, and we were thinking, well, maybe the wheels are going to come off as this moves on shore. We've seen it a million times. That didn't happen with Michael, but it did happen with Florence, and it was lucky because had that dry air not worked into the system, we could have very easily. There was enough warm sea surface temperatures, especially in the Gulf Stream, to sustain this thing. I mean, it was a little cooler along the coast, but not cool enough to seriously degrade the system. So it's a good thing that dry
water
air
was
moved
not
in.
the problem.
Yeah.
The waters here were easily a degree or two above average from where they are normally. The fuel was here.
All right, here's an inundation map from the National Hurricane Center. This is what was expected to happen as Hurricane Florence moved inland. And you can see that the yellow and red areas are greater than 3 feet up to 9 feet in the red areas. And that's exactly what happened. And we've seen this time and time again. We saw it with Hurricane oh gosh, Bill, what was that hurricane that went up? It was, I know Fran was bad there too, but I'm talking Floyd. The Hurricane Floyd.
99, Floyd.
Yeah, Floyd caused a tremendous amount of damage in these same canals and waterways. Hurricane Fran did, Hurricane Bertha, Hurricane Isabel. I mean, there's a long history of hurricanes that have hit up there
doing
that have
this.
caused
Yes.
tremendous amounts of flooding. What was that?
The only difference with this one, usually the hurricanes get in and they get out. This one did its thing, but it didn't leave.
Right. Oh, by the way, here was the track for Hurricane Florence. Very long tracker, going all the way across from Africa, and you can see the system became a major hurricane uh, well southeast of Bermuda, way south, and way northeast of the Leeward Islands. And then it weakened a little bit, and then it's re-strengthened south of Bermuda. Now, one thing I want to mention while I have this image up, and that is at this point when it was in this position right here, right about in this area right here, I had the red dot at Hurricane City pegged on Morehead City, North Carolina. Now, at the time that that was posted, I believe that at least the 3-day cone anyway was still out in here somewhere. It wasn't quite at the coast. So I was out in front of the National Hurricane Center on the red movement of the red dot, which the red dot at Hurricane City is the city that's most likely to be impacted by the hurricane as it's approaching, whether it's the right front quadrant, whether it's the eye of a very intense hurricane. It's usually one or the other. But I had Morehead City pegged for days and days, and then right as it approached the coast and got right when it was about in this area right in here, I shifted it down to Wilmington. But for all intents and purposes, it was really bad in Morehead City as well. They had the whole onshore fetch the entire time in Morehead City, whereas in Wilmington they had the eye pass over, they had all the wind shifts, and so probably the wind damage may have actually been worse north of Wilmington. And so that's why I kept Morehead City featured for so long in Hurricane City before I started using Wilmington as the featured city. And by the way, these were my predictions before the season started. This is a map of showing potential tracks, and if you notice, the track of that I said for the middle of the season was basic Hurricane Florence track. So let me show you what Florence actually did. And Florence was something like this. It came up and did this kind of a number, and then dipped off to the southwest, and then came up and went off to the northeast. So it's not bad. I mean, if you look at the orange track compared to my white track below, it's kind of the same thinking, middle of the season, exactly what it was. It just came in more from the east-southeast as opposed to the south-southeast, and basically did affect the entire the east coast of North Carolina, and northern South Carolina. And then, of course, we had Michael, but this was based on an early season track over here. This track was Alberto early in the season, so I was dead on the Alberto track pretty much. But if you flip this over and moved it over here, that would be Michael's track, which would have went like this. So, I mean, basically, it was just flipped around, the Michael track. So I think overall my track reasoning was sound this hurricane season, so I'm really proud of the job I did on my seasonal track predictions. Way here are all the rivers that overflowed in North Carolina from Hurricane Florence. Major flooding. These were all areas that had major damage and homes flooded, and it wasn't solid blanket of flooding like you would see on the news. It was sporadic. There was areas, wherever the rivers come together or, were wide rivers, they all flooded, overflowed their banks. You can see over here 43.6 feet flood stage, 25.5 feet. And, I watched Mark Sudduth's end of season video, and he claimed in that video that they're still having some rivers near flood stage in the leftovers from Hurricane Florence. That's just unbelievable.
Get out of here. No.
Yeah, they're still having some flooding issues from Hurricane Florence all this time after Florence hit. We're talking, let's see, September 14th, October,
no.
October 14th, November 14th. It's two and a half months later. We're still talking about flooding from severe rainfall from the hurricane season. Unbelievable. Oh, here are my predictions of the cities I predicted this year. All of them were hit this year. It's happened a few times in the past. I've been doing this since 2003. This is one of a few times where all 5 of my top 5 were impacted. I think it happened in 2005 and 2004. Sable Island, Nova Scotia was affected by Tropical Storm Chris. Wilmington, North Carolina was my number one for the United States, hit by Hurricane Florence. The eye passed right over it. Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, they had tropical storm force winds from Florence. Cape Hatteras, North Carolina was brushed by Hurricane Florence. Isle of Pines, Cuba, which is near the west tip of Cuba, impacted by subtropical storm Alberto before the season started. And then for my moderate threats, Antigua was affected by Tropical Storm Isaac. Marathon was affected by Tropical Storm Gordon. Fort Walton Beach was affected by Subtropical Storm Alberto. I got to update that to include a brush from Hurricane Michael. But if you look at the yellow areas, what stands out is, normally, Bill, you can attest to this, I've picked usually an island or two in the Bahamas, usually a city or two on the peninsula of Florida, and sometimes a city or two on the Texas coastline. None of those areas I had at a high risk this year, and none of them were impacted.
I'm bringing this up for a reason.
Yeah.
You've been accused in the past
of
being Florida-centric. Notice what's not there.
Well, a peninsula, anyway. I mean,
the peninsula.
Yeah, I mean, I did predict Marathon and Fort Walton Beach. Now,
but you had your reasons for that. That the numbers pointed to those particular locations, and they needed to be highlighted, and they were.
Yeah, and the reason, it's interesting mentioning Marathon, Florida. The reason I picked Marathon, they were hit last year by Hurricane Irma, which was my number. They were in my top 5 last year, Marathon, and they were hit by Hurricane Irma. The eye passed right over them. So people say, well, I thought it was based on return rates. Why are you using Marathon again? And I went back in history and researched, and almost every time they were hit by a major hurricane and a Marathon, many times they get hit the following year with a tropical storm. So I decided, you know what? It's happened too many times to ignore it. So I'm going to put Marathon in my top 20, even though they were hit last year. And sure enough, Tropical Storm Gordon went right through there and into the Gulf of Mexico. It did not affect the peninsula, but it hit my Marathon, which was, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, my number 10 pick Marathon. So I'm really proud of my predictions this year. This may have been my best year of predictions, not only because I nailed so many cities, but because the ones that typically get hit, I did not have as high risk and they didn't get hit. So really good job this year. I'm just really proud of these predictions. And, I was on Stormfront Freaks last night, and we talked extensively about how I come up with this formula and why I do it. Anybody that's interested can go to Jim's Predictions, and I have a blog explaining exactly how I calculate this, and it has been very successful. And I only 2 years I did not hit any of my top 20, and that was like 2013 and 14, I believe. Or was it 14?
This is not 15? A blind man just throwing darts at a dartboard.
Exactly. It's worked. It's effective. When you only have 2 bad years out of 15, that's pretty damn good.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's about it for Michael.
Florence.
Florence. There we go again. So, Bill and I keep messing up Matthew and Michael. Like, we keep saying Matthew instead of Michael. And I've heard the people on the Weather Channel doing that too. Like, they're Matthew. I meant to say Michael. Oh, damn it. The M storms have been a bitch lately. And, I wouldn't be surprised if next year we end up with another M name storm. That's a blockbuster hurricane. Like, and that really...
I can think of it. I can think of a name for a hurricane, and it starts with M and ends with F.
Yeah, you want to know what next year's M name is?
What is it?
Melissa. So it's a girl.
I had a girlfriend named
2 boys, and now it's time for a girl to do open a can of whip ass on somebody next year.
Well, no, not necessarily. The M female name had her fun in 2017. Remember Maria? Puerto Rico does.
That's right. Very good point. Maria. Forgot about Maria.
Matthew.
The M's, man. What's going on with the M's?
Matthew, Michael, and Maria. All motherfuckers.
Yeah. I don't know. What happened the year prior to that? Let's look at the list.
What year was that? 2016?
Since 2014, Marco was nothing. 2015, Mindy was nothing.
I think
16
16.
Matthew, 17 Maria, 18 Michael, and next year's Melissa. So we'll see how the M storms pan out. And then
Can
as far as
can she live up to her brother and sister? We'll find out.
and the F1 Florence, the last few years the F name hasn't amounted to anything. What was the other storm? Oh, Harvey. Last year, so we had Harvey, and none of the other H storms have amounted to anything in the last several years. And
The
then we
F
had
storms have
Irma.
been a problem for North Carolina, Fran and Felix in the 90s. Florence now.
Well, I'm just going since 2014, just to
I
cover
know.
the
I'm
last
just
few
rattling
years.
off. We have histories of this, is my point.
Yeah, but my point is that the last several years, other than the M name storms, none of the other name storms that have been dramatic have had any brothers or sisters that have followed in their footsteps. Like Irma, for example, nothing. Well, Ida, 2015, Ida was pretty bad.
Later name, yeah. Ida was terrible. Irene and Isabel have been terrible here. I've had some horrible ice storms here.
Yeah, that's right. You have. Yep. Look, the big story of the year was Michael. Would you argue that, Bill? I mean,
Absolutely not. Michael. There will be entire meteorological books written about that storm. I mean, that damn thing broke all the rules. Usually, you see them coming apart as they approach the coast. This one was strengthening right up until the last second.
yeah, so here's what happened with Michael. I mean, and I said to Bill, after Florence hit, we were kind of recoiling from that whole thing because Bill's had medical issues. He's talked about that earlier in the show. And I had these funerals and all kinds of tumultuous stuff going on. And we were kind of recoiling after Florence. And Bill said to me, well, I think that's it. We're going to get the one big one, and that's going to be it for the hurricane season. I said, I'm not so fast. I think we're going to get, one in October.
One more.
We're going to have one more. It's going to be a doozy. Just hold on. There's going to be something big to cover here. And Florence, Michael, this is so stupid.
This is terrible.
This is just, oh my God. So Michael,
you would think after 15 years, you've been on much longer than that.
Michael.
Go on.
Oh, this is sick. So Michael develops, right? And I'm watching this, and I said to Bill, I was up at my niece's wedding. Beautiful wedding, by the way, and it was up in Jackson, in the St. Augustine area. Beautiful wedding. I mean, just fantastic all the way around. They drove off on a white horse and carriage at the end of the night. I mean, beautiful, just a beautiful wedding, like a dream wedding.
Good.
And so I'm keeping a keen eye on what's going on down in the Caribbean, and I see Michael developing, and I'm thinking, oh boy. Because we've seen this chapter play out before. It's warm sea surface temperatures. Yeah, there's a little bit of shear. The shear was what really got me though, because Bill, the shear was like 30 knots when it was developing, and it still bucked the odds and went ahead and developed. I mean, do you have any explanation for that?
We've seen that before. Look at 2005.
Well, no, actually, 2005 there wasn't that much shear. 2005 wasn't.
Well,
that...
maybe I should preface that. They all said, if I remember correctly, they said Wilma, the shear would kill Wilma, but it did not, because it aligned itself with the front. It fed off of it.
Yeah, yeah, but I mean, it still became a Category 5. I mean, high end, like it was 200 miles an hour or something in the Caribbean, Wilma?
Might have been 175 with a pinhole. I think it got down to 882 down in the Caribbean.
No, I think they had that thing pegged. Let me look that up real quick, because I'm pretty sure Wilma was 882 millibars, 160 knots. All right, so
now was that satellite based, or did they actually measure that from the damn
that was
plane?
Hurricane Hunter. That was the Hurricane Hunters.
Good God! Now
190.
that had to be a ride from hell.
Yep. Can you imagine that? Getting in the truck, the old utility truck, and riding out 190. That'd be a hair-raising experience. So anyway, let's get back on track here. So I'm coming back from this wedding, and this Michael is continuing to strengthen, and I decide at that point I was in touch with you the whole time, and I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna go get this. I'm gonna leave in the morning. I packed everything in the truck: the chainsaw, the towels, extra change of clothes. I grabbed weather instruments, everything I could possibly think of, flashlights, batteries. I had water, I had food, I had first aid kit.
Everything.
I had everything I could possibly need. Fix-a-flat for the tires. I had everything. And decided I'm going to go get this. I figured, you know what? I've seen 3 close friends die. I'm not wasting any more time. I'm going into the hurricane, and I'm going to ride it out like a horse or a cow. And what they do is they get out in an open field, and they back their butt into the wind. And I figured with the truck and the Lexan glass protecting it, that's the way to do it. So I decided I'm going up there, and we started broadcasting the night before. I arrived the night before Irma and Wilma. Michael.
No insect, you damn it. Please.
If I keep up like this, I'll just go through every hurricane that's ever hit land before I get to the right one. Michael was approaching as a Category 3, I believe, the night we were doing the show, correct?
It is a 3, yes.
Category 3. The projections, I believe, were for it to get up to 145 or 140 or something like that. So then
I think it was 140 at landfall, and they kept upping it.
Yeah, so then in the morning I wake up and I get on the phone with Bill, and I'm like, this is. I even put a picture on Twitter of Kermit the Frog throwing up in a toilet, because I really felt like this is. I really wasn't anticipating this kind of an event, and here I am, and I got to do it. I mean, there's no changing your mind, hedging your bets, blah blah. I'm there to do this, and so. Bill and I, we got on the phone, and I said, you know, I'm thinking of just maybe staying under the overhang, because this is really intense, and I don't know if I want to necessarily get killed. And then I went outside and I looked at the environment and the way the winds were shifted to the northeast, and I thought, this is not going to work. The winds are going to get underneath that overhang, and they're going to beat the front of that truck up, and that's not what I intended. I intended to have the back of the truck into the wind. So I did like what ships do in harbors, and the Navy ships. They decided they're going to go out to sea and ride it out, and that's exactly what I did with the truck. I said, I'm not staying here. I'm going out into an open field somewhere, an open lot, and I'm going to get away from the power lines, the trees, any flooding areas. I'm not going into the surge zone. And so I set up the remote camera on the DuPont Bridge, which is leading into Tyndall Air Force Base. And the reason I did that is I wanted to be able to retrieve the camera before I left. If I had put it in Mexico Beach, I might not have. Now, in hindsight, I know I could have got in there. But the place I really wanted to mount that camera would have been absolutely epic video had I put that camera there. But in hindsight, and here's a dirty little secret I'm going to mention on the show tonight, and I really didn't want to make mention of this, but whether it's a brain fart, whatever happened, I was erasing that SD card and that camera before I left.
Can I yell at you, please?
Yeah.
You forgot the damn SD card!
I forgot the SD card to put it in the camera, so we're filming the whole time, and I'm thinking, oh, this is going to be epic video, because the billboard fell over, there was debris flying through the air like missiles, and I thought this is going to be unbelievable. And then I realized when I go to retrieve the camera, there's no SD card in this thing, and it's like, oh my God. So it really didn't matter that I didn't set it up in Mexico Beach, because I wouldn't have gotten the video anyways unless we were showing it live. Bill had the foresight.
I think I got 90% of it.
Bill got enough, and Bill, to your defense, I know during the live feed you wanted to go to that camera several times, and I'm like, no, I got debris all around me, and I'm yelling, let's go, stay with me. And hindsight, we probably should have just forcefully went away from the truck a few times more, especially when the eye got there, and we could have got at least the eye on that remote camera. But you did a good job.
I think we got a piece of it because it got really, really still at the time you were getting the eye, or very, very near it. I don't remember seeing the sun or the true sunlight, but man, did it get calm, as in quiet.
Yeah, you could see everything in that video on that remote camera. So, and before you couldn't see anything; it was complete whiteout conditions. So let me show some images.
I remember saying you got a piece of the eye on both of your cameras, and
yes,
I wasn't going to make that statement unless I was sure, and I was sure enough to make that statement.
That's right. Notice down here, the buildings are. All the roofs are completely torn off down here of these condominiums. Those are like 4 or 5 story condominiums, maybe even higher than that, maybe 5 or 6 stories high. And notice all the roofs missing. Here's the billboard that crashed down in front of the camera. This dock down here was completely underwater during the video. I remembered I couldn't even see the dock anymore. And the water had to have come up just below this bridge. That's how high that water got.
How high do you think that bridge is?
Oh, the bridge was easily 20 feet above the water line. I mean, that bridge was really high. That's a big bridge, Bill. That's not a little bridge. That's like something you see in a big city, like a big span, not like the Golden Gate Bridge necessarily, but it's a big bridge. I mean, it's
for the water to come up all the way to that. That's why I asked.
Yeah, it was high, and the reason I know it was that high is because over here, on this side of the bridge, over here, the water came into those bays and waterways up near Callaway where I was sitting, and it took those boats and flung them up on the seawalls, and I might have a picture of that too. But that's how I know the water was that high on the cam shot. Yeah, here is the actual position of the camera. The camera was mounted right here. And it was right on this pole right here in the corner. And it was aiming in this direction like this. And this billboard came crashing down right here in front of the camera. And these are the roofs that blew off out here. And the water, Bill, you saw this. These huge waves were just rolling in here. It was just inundating this whole area with waves. It was completely crazy what was going on that camera. So here's what happened during the camera shot. This is from the height of the storm. Bill was streaming this camera live, I think maybe while I had my internet outage. And you can see the billboard is right here. And look at this piece of debris above it. Now, if you look at the size of the billboard, that billboard's got to be about 20 feet across. And so that piece of debris has to be about 10 feet long that's flying through the air like a missile. And
you think that's a piece of the billboard?
No, because the billboard was already down at that point.
Okay.
This was something that was coming from this direction over here, like just out of nowhere, like who knows what. It could be a piece of a mobile home park or something. But at this point, this was 1:25 Eastern time.
12:25 Central.
12:25 Central, right in the middle of the day, and that's how dark it was.
And one thing you don't see here is go back and listen to the video and watch the video and listen to the noise.
Yep, just unbelievable.
It's haunting, and that clinking you hear is the wind. I think it's the pole or whatever it was on. It was flexed. It honestly sounded like a flagpole getting beat to hell.
By the way, to view these videos, go to our YouTube channel, and I don't even want to try it tonight because we're having problems just showing images, and if I try a video, it's probably going to freeze everything up, so I'm not going to bother with it. Go to our YouTube channel, hurricanecity.com. Go to the top where the menu is at the top, and you see the logo, and there's a YouTube logo right there. Click on that logo, and all the last few videos. There's a 15-minute version of Hurricane Michael and an hour-long version of the documentary where we do the before, during, and after. But here is my truck at the height of the storm. This is right before the eye arrived. And this is my Lexan glass that's on the back of the truck. Now, this is able to withstand winds of, well, I don't know, but I know that it can be hit with sledgehammers. There's videos all over the internet. If you Google Lexan glass, you will see there are videos out there with people wailing on them with sledgehammers and they can't break. And this glass ended up breaking on the back side. So here it was before. It got hit a bunch of times, but it held up relatively well. And then you'll see what happens. You can't really see it that well here. Here is the hole right here. That's about the size of my head. Now I'm sitting right here, over here in the corner, and so I literally could have been killed by that. And I believe that's the culprit right there, Bill. That thing right there. It looks like a vent maybe from a roof, where the roofing paper joins a vent for ventilation, and it looks like that's what that is. It's a ventilation pipe that flew off a roof and just pierced, because if you look at the size of this ring right here on this object, it's almost the same size as the hole.
It is.
So this may have been over here and just wailed in it, and then the wind slid it off to the side, and then it quickly went boom the other way. You can see that in the video as well, especially the long version, the hour long video. About halfway through, you'll see this thing hitting the window and then sliding off the window and blowing back the other direction. I believe that is what ended up destroying the glass.
But I can guarantee you this. With regular glass, you'd have been dead.
Well, I don't know about dead, but it would have been close. I mean, it would have been really, really bad. I mean,
I don't want to find out. Put it that way.
Yeah. Lexan glass is necessary. And I had a whole bunch of notes for tonight, but real quickly here, this is about the last image I'm going to show. This was the storm surge totals: 19 feet Mexico Beach, 12 feet down near Port St. Joe, and nearly 12 feet up near Tyndall Air Force Base was the estimated sea level rise as the core was moving onshore from Hurricane Michael. And there's the track of Hurricane Michael. And again, I was located right in this area right here. That's about where I was, in that blue circle right there. So I got the left quadrant of the eye, the northern portion of the eye wall, and the eye, and then the south side of the eye as it passed by.
And the backside was definitely worse. It kicked your ass.
It was really, really bad. Just make sure I'm not leaving out any images that are crucial here to the discussion. Oh, and here's my position during the eye. There I was inside the red dot. I barely got inside the eye wall and got the sun coming out. You can see that in the video, Bill says, and you got the sun coming out, Jim. You got in the eye, and you got the eye on both cameras. And here is the actual shot of the eye as I was in the eye, and notice the bright blue skies up in here. Nice blue eye, and eye wall was, expanding out like this. There's the stadium effect. There's the eye wall right there.
You know it's a major because you only get the stadium effect in majors.
Yep. It's just an amazing, amazing experience. But notice these two cars right here while I have this up. These two cars right here, these little compact cars, they stayed upright during this hurricane. Now, how that happened, I know how it happened. Because on the front side, the winds were coming in like this directly in front of the cars. So the whole time the winds were basically hitting these cars either from the front, and then when the backside came in, the winds were from the back. So these cars were lucky enough that they had the winds coming from facing the wind. The winds were facing the cars, and then the winds were behind the cars in both instances as the hurricane passed, as opposed to this kind of a direction, which would have definitely blew the cars over. So they were just lucky.
A Category 3 may have blown those cars over if they weren't positioned just right. We're talking 110, 115 miles an hour. Because usually little cars like that are missiles.
Yeah, and that brings me to my next comment, and that is the storm chasers that were out
You
there.
took the
And
words right out of my mouth. It's going to set
yep,
it up for you.
I saw. And we watched Jeff Petrosky over the years. He's covered, he covered Harvey really good last year, but I had no idea that he was literally driving around in a clown car. And when I say a clown car, I'm talking about, when you see those videos of like 20 clowns piling into a little teeny car, that's the kind of cars that they were driving around in. These little like compact 2-door, 4-door mini, like, you know,
Is a Mini Cooper a good description?
not that small, but kind of like a Toyota kind of car, like a, you know, I don't know.
Toyota
Jeff
can make
Gammons
some
looked
good
like he was
cars. Be
driving a
careful.
Chevy Volt or something. They were both driving very small cars, so they were running around and they were right in front of my camera when I was in front of the Texaco station. I'm like, what are these guys doing? They had gas cans on top of the car and they're aiming out the window, and they were apparently Jeff was doing one of his updates on his Twitter updates right in front of me when I was in front of the Texaco station. And then they both took off. And the reason I know this is I watched their video and it cuts off. They were running inland. They were getting away from where I was located, getting further inland, and they found a Walmart store and they hunkered down there. And then they lost their signal, and we never got any video from them on Twitter or Periscope or anything like that. We don't even know if their cars got damaged, what happened to them. But I can tell you a lot of storm chasers had severe damage to their vehicles. Uh,
Busted out windshields,
yep, busted out windshield.
windows.
Derek Sibley and his guys, they had they were underneath the overhang at the hotel. They had their cars mangled. The hoods were popping open. The glass broke. The running lights broke. The car was mangled. Tim Millar's instruments got mangled. I know Richard Horodener's Chase partner lost the complete car in the storm surge. I heard that. And here's another one. The guys from near
Uh,
Tyndall Air Force Base, Base Hunters, Base
There you
Hunters
go.
Chasers. Oh gosh, what is his name? And I can't remember his name, but he was there, and they had their windows smashed, and the windshield wipers were torn off. The side mirrors were ripped off the car. Um, uh, I know just about every storm chaser that was out in their cars with these little clown cars had severe damage to their cars. I went out with a big heavy duty truck that I knew could handle it, and I put Lexan glass on it and I backed it into the wind, which is the smartest way to do it. I only got away with the broken light on the top of the truck, the rack that blew off the top of my truck, which I couldn't believe the rack blew off, and the glass broke. But overall, the integrity of the truck was sound. I mean, nothing broke. It peeled the paint off the back of the truck, but it overall handled the situation very well. There was a lot of
Like I said,
guys,
your truck wouldn't talk to you for a week, but you're okay.
and another thing, another subject is these mesovortices, right? We heard a lot about the mesovortices around the eye wall, and I can tell you, I saw like swirls of wind out there, but if that's what mesovortices are, and there were a couple of times when the winds would be like this, right, behind my back, and then every once in a while something would come up from the side and get me. So I was thinking there was some twisting going on in the wind. There were mesovortices, but I think these mesovortices are not tornadoes. They're more like large gyres of wind, like hundreds of yards across, maybe a quarter mile, half mile wide swirls of wind that change with direction, but I don't think they're tornado type winds in these mesovortices. I didn't see that at
They
all.
remind me of spokes. You seen a bicycle wheel with spokes? Imagine that's the eye, and the vortices are like the spokes rotating around the wheel.
Yeah, I guess kind of. I would think of a better analogy would be like those little detergent balls that you throw in your washing machine
Okay.
and they swirl around in the washing machine. The washing machine is the hurricane, and those are the swirling little balls, which are the mesovortices spinning around in the washing machine. Like that's the way I
Now,
look at
what will be
mesovortices.
interesting is the next time, let's say we get into a category 3 or something slightly weaker, and the wind shear the wind shear is worse. So the wind shear is having an impact on the storm. Do we see more tornadoes or more tornado-like weather in the eye wall or around it? That there's so many different things. That's why we're going to do this again probably several times. You'll never see the same thing twice.
Well, look, most tornadoes I've seen in hurricanes are in feeder
Are the outer
bands.
bands?
The outer bands. They're not in the eye wall. They're just not. I mean, the mesovortices, and this is what people. There was a guy spreading rumors around, and I got an email about it, that he was telling everybody that all that damage up there in Panama City was caused by tornadoes, and that's simply not true. That was all straight line. That's what Category 4 winds do. I sat there and said that in the video when Bill and I were sitting there looking at all the damage. Some of the buildings were collapsed.
Look at the trees. They just fell like bulldozed.
Yeah. There couldn't have been enough tornadoes to do all that damage. Like those were not tornadoes. There could have been some derechos in there, maybe some, velocity winds screaming down to the surface, which you often see in intense hurricanes. You could have had that, but not tornadoes. There were some mesovortices. Maybe some were stronger than others. I know after Hurricane Andrew in 1992, Dr. Ted Fujita went down there and found that there was tornado-type damage caused by some mesovortices, but most of the report indicated that most of the mesovortices were of similar winds to the hurricane itself. So all they are is a shift in the wind of already. If a hurricane is 140 and you have mesovortices in there, the mesovortices are going to be 140 mile-an-hour winds just going in a different direction. That's basically what mesovortices
that could be enough to if a structure's already beaten up by the wind, that might be enough to take out a roof.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, the twisting of the wind, that's what causes all the damage in tornadoes.
Yep.
Because it's the central wind in one location and twisting at the same time that can cause that kind of damage. It's not to say like if mesovortices were tornadoes, you can only argue that they were tornado-like damage, not that the tornadoes had winds any more extreme than the hurricane itself. It's just that the winds were coming from a different direction, which causes that tearing of the objects, in a hurricane. So, and then we had people giggling and snickering in some of the videos. I saw some storm chasers out there like laughing and goofing around, and I'm just not down with that at all. I mean, maybe it was nervous laughter. I don't know what was happening, but all I was thinking is, and you can go watch the tape, Bill and I are like, oh my God, people are dying right now. That was our thoughts. Like, nobody's
The only thing I'm not proud of is my mouth. I use the F word too much, and I'm going to work on that. Jim edited a lot of that out, but I got to watch my mouth a little bit, but nothing over the top.
Yeah, look, you're going to swear in a situation like that, and if you're with me in the truck, you're going to drop some F-bombs. That's just inevitable. But it's better than laughing. I mean, we weren't laughing about it. We were just shocked at the moment, and things were flying around, and people were there. They would understand. And I've had a lot of people say to me, "I understand why you were saying those things."
The moment I'm proud of, and I wish we could play it, but technical issues precluded is, and I'm going to be very careful how I say this, is the woman. There was a woman helping a homeless friend of hers, and you picked her up and took her to the Walmart.
Right.
And when you took her back to the apartment, you and I both said, I told you to remind her, have her get a mattress.
Yep, I remember that. And
I hope that saved her life, and that's why I said that.
And that's why I would have liked to have probably tried to go back there and find out if she was okay, and find out if they really did have to get a mattress out and put it over their head, because that would have been completely awesome.
I'd have liked to have seen it.
To say to people, this is what you do. And we've had comments, and I really didn't want to go on a long tangent about this tonight, but the comments, I'm seeing some horrific comments on the videos. And not just mine, other chasers are getting slammed too. People are out there like, well, I hope you have a casket picked out, and it's the stupidest thing I've ever seen in my life, and why do you have to keep mentioning things are hitting your truck and all these? It's like, listen, there was one guy that was out there like, why do you have to keep mentioning things are hitting the truck? I go, because the audience might not know that something is hitting the truck. And why do you have to keep, going ooh and ah over everything. Well, you try putting your ass in the front seat of that truck and see how quiet you're going to remain as your truck is getting pelted by debris like that. And and then he called it a plumbing truck. Like, oh, he's out there in a plumbing truck. It's a utility truck. It's like what the power companies use to go out and fix. It's not a plumbing truck. Well, you could use it for plumbing, I guess, but it's a heavy duty truck that's designed for this kind of thing. It's not designed for this kind of thing, but it is able to be in this kind of an environment. And then now we know that. But um, the comments all over the internet. I know Derek's been slammed, but you shouldn't have been outside. People were, and I'm like, you know what? There's something to be learned from every video from these intense hurricanes. People that are in these hurricanes and they have things hitting, like the missile flying by my truck. That's a learning thing. Like, how many times are people going to get to see a piece of sheet metal flying at 150 miles an hour and realize, oh my God, like, I'm glad I didn't stay in my house. Like, I don't have any shutters.
I mean, now look, are we going? I'm going to think you learned you're not going to do things the exact same way the next time you do this. I mean, you are a lot of things, a lot of things you did right, and they'll be repeated. But there are things that you learned that you won't do again, probably.
Well, I mean, I don't know about that, but there are things that I will do that I didn't do. And there's probably more of that. Like, for example, external microphone. Now, I had a lot of people commenting, what's too quiet in the video? We couldn't hear the wind.
That's how well sealed that truck is.
That truck was well sealed. There was the Lexan glass was protecting the back, so the wind was hitting that instead of the window of the truck. So you really couldn't hear the buffeting of the wind. So I'll have an external microphone next year. I'm going to mount it up on top of the truck. It's going to have protection, and it'll be downwind. So you'll be able to hear the wind next year. Next time I get in Oregon, you'll be able to hear that wind. I will get more interviews with people that were impacted before and afterwards. I will try to help people a little bit more, and I will try to get the camera more deeper into maybe a surge zone or more where I think buildings are going to come apart. There were some great mounting opportunities that I missed out on simply because it wasn't a good place to mount the camera, or I was just worried I wasn't going to be able to get back there and get the camera. So I decided not to do that. And I'm going to put an SD card in there next time, of course. And
I'll kill him personally. I'll kill you personally if you don't have an SD card in that camera next year.
All right, so that brings me to my next point, and that is the technology. So we got the camera technology and the instrumentation. Now, those were the two big failures in this hurricane because the instruments, I bought these instruments at Pro Bass Shops on the way up there because the instruments I was going to bring that are right here on the table behind me, which now work, of course, were not working. They were not working when I was ready to go to Michael. So I was going to mount these on the truck. They go to 200 miles an hour. I had to buy instruments at Pro Bass Shop, which only go to 90 miles an hour. 99 miles an hour. And they failed during the storm. They didn't measure hardly crap. I mean, they only measure winds like 30 seconds after the fact. It shows up on the meter. Like they were terrible.
Didn't they give you like an 89 mile an hour gust that we know?
The highest gust I measured was 89. And I know for a fact the side windows on the truck the side mirrors blew in. So if you can drive 100 on I-95, it's not going to blow those mirrors in. So the winds easily were over 100. I would say they were probably around 120, 130 sustained with gusts of maybe 140 at times.
Maybe 150 when it got to really wide out.
Gust of 150
once.
So next year, I'm going to either have these instruments on the truck, and I'm investigating these weather flow instruments because they have the sonic instruments, and they're very affordable. So I'm thinking of going with weather flow next year. I'm going to investigate that more thoroughly. And the remote camera is going to be, we're hopefully going to deploy something called the Arlo Go. It's an AT&T network design camera that works off the towers, and it's battery operated, and you can remotely turn it on and off and look at the images and the video coming out of the camera with sound, night vision, everything. So we're going to try to deploy that.
Thank you very much.
It's what?
I said once again, AT&T, thank you very much for your network.
AT&T blew the doors off. They stayed up the entire time, even during the aftermath. I was able to film heading out of town. We lost it for 15 minutes. That was it. So I'm really happy with AT&T, and that's why we're going to go with the Arlo Go next year. I want to mention something about my predictions, and I wanted to mention this earlier. And I said it on Stormfront Freaks last night. I'm sick and tired of these bogus predictions that are released before the hurricane season starts. 10 to 16 named storms, 51% for a 2,000-mile stretch of coastline. These are the kinds of predictions that are coming out. But apparently, Joe Bastardi from Weather Bell has a method of choosing a geographic area. So what he does is he draws a red zone over the northeastern United States or the mid-Atlantic or something. He goes, this is my high-risk area. So he got that right. He got one of the zones right this year, and he's bragging till the cows come home. Look at what I did. Meanwhile, I'm picking a city on a map, a dot, and the eye passed right over my city. And I'm getting crickets from the national media on this. And I want to thank Stormfront Freaks for inviting me on last night to explain my methodology and to get the word out to people that otherwise might not give a damn about what I have to say. And I hope that they're paying attention, because the way I look at it is this. Narrowing it down, there's nothing wrong with that as long as you tell people that there will be other areas hit other than what I pick. And it also helps
every
people.
year that happens.
And every year that happens, exactly. So as long as these other agencies mention that along the way, that there are going to be other areas impacted that they may not pick, but at least these are the high-risk areas based on climatology, return rates, El Enzo, and the North Atlantic Oscillation, which has been a gem that I've added to my predictions. So I think it's time for these agencies to step it up, especially Phil Klotzbach, and stop with this 1,000-mile stretch of coastline crap, and let's start narrowing it down and helping people understand, based on the type of activity that we're expecting, who can be expected to be impacted versus who might not have as high of a risk. And let's try to hone this science down a little bit. And that's the end of that rant. But I just wanted to say I'm sick of being marginalized on my predictions, and I'm telling you, 13 out of 15 years, on average, 3 out of my top 5 are impacted. That's phenomenal.
For example, if somebody were to come out and say, from here, from Exmoor, Virginia, to my house, which is Virginia Beach, which is not that much, we're talking maybe, what, Jim, a 60 or 70-mile stretch?
Yeah, about that.
If they were to come out and say, this is an area that I think is at high risk, that's fine. Or if you come out and said, the Outer Banks of North Carolina, that's fine. Narrow it down.
Yeah, exactly. So, and I can't share it tonight, but if I get a lot of emails from people thanking me either before or after the season, depending on what ends up happening. Like, oh my God, I told my wife, let's get prepared. And she was hemming and hawing about it. And I told her that this guy that always gets his cities right told me, made his predictions and said, our area is at high risk and he's hardly ever wrong. We need to go out and get prepared. And then they get hit. And then they come to me after the season. Often they get their ass kicked. Not just they get their ass kicked, yeah. And they come to me and they go, thank you so much for sending out the alarm bells that we needed to get to the store and get ready. Because sometimes people don't, if they hear 15 named storms, they're like, what? What does that mean? Who cares about 15 named storms? 15 could be, what's the difference between 10 and 15? Most people don't even understand that there's a difference. Certain areas,
if there's one storm in your house, you don't care about the other 14.
Yeah, exactly. But there are areas that get hit more often when there's 10 named storms compared to 15 named storms. And there are other areas that get, when there's an active season, they always get hit. So you got to pay attention. There is a correlation between how active a season or inactive a season is compared to who does or doesn't get hit. So you got to make it make sense.
All right, our final subject of the night, and we probably should have done this earlier, but here I go. And Jim knows what I'm about to do. The frickin' local media on the Florida Panhandle, Panama City area. Maybe I'm being harsh, but I'm sorry. Y'all sucked during that storm. Nothing.
Yeah, so here's what happened. The hurricane hits. I wasn't listening to radio before the hurricane, so I can't compare before and after. But I can tell you this: when
It was there.
the hurricane, well, you were listening on the internet. I don't know about the terrestrial radio that you can pick up in your car, but the I can tell you that after the hurricane hit, I got in the radio and I flipped through the dial. Maybe one or two FM stations and one or two AM stations were on air. All the rest were knocked off air. The two FM stations were playing music, probably from outside of the impacted area, like from some simulcasted radio station outside the area, country music, rock and roll, rap music, whatever it was. And then there was like one station that was giving any kind of hurricane information, and all they were doing was looping a recorded press conference from earlier in the morning of what the impact is in the area from the emergency managers and the governor, right? And that looped over and over. They had no information for hours and hours and hours. There was nothing. People were waking up in the morning of the following morning, the aftermath morning, and they had no communication with public radio.
Nothing.
There was nobody giving any updates. So here's what I think they need to do. Not only should they be forced to have redundancy, and I understand there were Tampa stations that were supposed to be covering for them. It took them a while. It took them like 24 hours to get on air, maybe because the repeater tower was knocked down or something. But here's what the law needs to be. I was thinking about this really thoroughly. What the state or the federal government needs to come up with a law that states in a natural disaster, all radio stations for 24 hours after the disaster are forced to either relay any emergency management press conferences that are live. And every time they go live, they have to go. They have to, even if they're playing music, they have to get out of the music and they have to go right to the live press conference.
I don't give a damn about the music, frankly.
Yeah, well, maybe they don't have anybody in the studio to talk. That could have very well been. Those could have been recordings looping in the back, at the radio station, and there was not even anybody in the radio station. That's quite possible.
A lot of those people left.
Why?
Because they were afraid. They didn't want to be there.
Well, then, like I said, there needs to be a station outside the affected area that's teamed up with that station, and it can't be monetary. They can't be making money on this with teaming up. It's got to be simply law is forcing us to do this. And when the hurricane hits and it passes through, it could be for any earthquake, it could be for snowstorm, whatever. If it's really, really bad, there needs to be all radio stations on deck, and they need to stream all press conferences from the Emergency Operations Center via satellite, and they have to broadcast this stuff on air.
I don't want to get too much into this subject because it's not hurricane related. You saw the same damn problem today in Alaska after that earthquake. Nothing for those people. Nothing.
Well, now you're talking local TV, though. I know the stations were knocked off air.
Out.
Well, it could have been radio, and we don't know. But
radio and television, it was all over CNN. Out.
Look, it's an easy fix. If their tower gets knocked down, there's another station. There's always plenty of radio stations, AM and FM, that can get their signals out one way or the other. And they need to be at the Emergency Operations Center with a reporter asking questions, or just simply lean in with the microphone and let people know where are the shelters, where's the food, where's the help, where can we drive, when do we have to stay home, can we get out on the road, what's open, what's closed. People had no idea what was going on. They were walking around like zombies. They're coming up to my truck. Where's the shelters? And I'm like getting on the phone with Greg Gibbs, the guy that in emergency management, and he was telling me where the shelters were, and I'm repeating it to people. And I'm thinking, why do I have to do this? Where are the radio stations, for God's sake?
I'm sitting there googling, where are the shelters, and I'm giving you the name of a high school which couldn't get them there because of down power lines. I mean, we tried.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. That was another service we were literally providing for people while we were there. I mean, call it what you want. Well, it's thrill seekers and you're just listen, we were showing the wind. We were showing before and after the hurricane. people evacuate for hurricanes. They were able to go on the internet and watch their neighborhood coming apart. That's part of the service. The aftermath, telling people where the shelters are, any information I can pass along. Just simply filming somebody on camera makes them feel good, like I'm alive. I'm happy to tell my story. There's a service to be provided by us being in these hurricanes, and I'm not apologizing for what I did at all. I think there were things I'd do a little differently, but for the most part, it was an overall success. And if I had to do it again, it wouldn't have been much different. There would be a few minor tweaks, and that's about it.
Yeah, but the media was a complete. I'm sorry, the media up there was a complete and utter failure. I don't think that would happen in South Florida, and I do not believe it would happen in this area here.
Well, maybe. I mean, your area, I don't know. You think stations would stay on?
No, because I saw what they did for Isabel. They went to their they have to evacuate the stations here because they're right on the water. So they're forced to have contingencies. What they do is they drive about 20, 25 miles inland to Suffolk, which is well inland, or inland enough where their transmitter sites are, and they have a building where they can go where their transmitter site is, and they have a room in there, and they set up they split the news team up. They'll send an anchor, they'll send a meteorologist, they'll send whatever they need to that broadcast facility inland where they can broadcast from. That's what should have been done here.
Well, Panama City, for all due respect, Panama City doesn't get affected nearly as much as your area does up there, Bill, believe it or not. I mean, you get a lot of brushes and this, glancing blows and this and that, but Panama City, it's just not a very high return rate there, especially for hurricanes. They get a lot of tropical storms from the Gulf, Category 1s, brushes and near misses and backdoors and all kinds of crap, but they very rarely get something plowing right in like this. So they're not set up for it. But this is going to be a learning experience. They're going to have to completely rebuild those communities, and they're going to have to get their infrastructure back. So when it happens again, which it will, they have communications to reach people in the aftermath and tell them where to go and what's open, what isn't, what are you supposed to do? Am I supposed to stay put? I don't know. They got to have that information for people. They have to. And that was just a utter failure that they didn't have that. And where were the ham radio operators, by the way? Aren't they supposed to fill the void on this?
They could have. Now, I don't know. Obviously, some of that, sometimes they scream that, sometimes they don't. They may have been there. I just may not have heard about it. By the way, that's something I'm working on in the off season. I want to have my ham license. That way I can communicate. That way maybe we can communicate with them while we're live out there, and maybe it's an extra source of information for us. So hopefully, when I'm with you next time, or whenever that happens, I have my ham license and I can do that. That's an extra avenue that we'll have. I'm working on that in the off season.
Okay, that sounds good to me. I mean, at least for you receive it, and
yeah.
I don't know if you're going to be able to transmit, but that
well,
would be.
Yeah, I'll be able to transmit if I have my license. Yes, I can do that all off a handheld and a cigarette lighter. If
people think they're safe next year simply because we've had 3 years in a row where we've been threatened by major hurricanes in the United States,
no.
This has happened 4 times in a row. So we had 16 Matthew, 17 Irma, Harvey, Maria, and 18 we've had Michael. So 3 years in a row we've had majors impact the United States. Has it happened 4 times in a row? Yes, it has. It's happened in 1947, 48, 49, and 50. It happened in 1964, 65, 66, and 67. And then twice it happened 5 times in a row. In 1915, 16, 17, 18, and 19. And 1957, 58, 59, 60, and 61. So we could see 2 more years, maybe even 3 more years of major strikes coming up here over the next several years. So be ready next year. Don't think that just because, and I got lulled into that too after 2005. 2004 and 5 were blockbuster seasons, right? And then we thought, well, this was going to continue. And then 2006, it just went, it dropped off, right? That might not happen this year. It's been 3 years in a row now. And with the climate changing, you never know. I mean, we could be in for some doozies here. And I think everybody needs to be ready, even areas further north. In your area, Bill, and up north of 30, I'm really concerned. I've seen an uptick in landfall activity north of 30 based on my database projections, and I'm really concerned with warming seas that we're going to see more powerful hurricanes further north. So anybody listening,
do I think a Category 5 would come up here? No. But with the way this coastline is, a Category 2, even a Category 3 would be the equivalent of a Category 5 further south.
Category 4 is not out of the question.
I'm not going to say that.
Florence could have happened. It could have happened. All right, so
yeah,
let's go ahead and make one more mention. Folks, this stuff is expensive. We talked about it a million times. Listen, we have people that donate regularly.
Thank you.
We've got probably a couple dozen people that are really loyal and donate regularly. Some donate $10, some donate $200. You know, they're all ranges of donations, but it's not enough. And we are hemorrhaging. When I go out on the road, that credit card gets racked up. The PayPal gets racked up. So the equipment, cameras and upgrades and wires and software downloads and you name it, right? And so we got to get instruments next year. We got to get the Arlo next year. This stuff costs money. Travel expenses, everything. We need help desperately. Please, I have a donation page set up, hurricanecity.com/donate. All the links are at hurricanecity.com. Any amount, $10, $5, it doesn't matter. Just give us whatever you can to help out. It's kind of like the PBS plea here. You saw footage and you saw coverage this year on the social networks that nobody else was doing. They might have been on live for 15, 20 minutes or 30 minutes or not at all. We were live through the whole freaking thing. We were before, during, and after. We were driving through neighborhoods. We were looking for damage from people's houses and trying to do checks on people. We were doing a show the night before. We were doing shows even previous nights on Florence. I think we were doing hurricane watch shows. And
we did two nightly shows for Florence before the landfall.
Right. So, in a nutshell, any donation helps at all. I mean, a little bits, especially during the season. Try to funnel us some money. It really helps to go a long way. Look, and I should have said this on Stormfront Freaks last night, and that is because Hurricane City is a quote like hobbyist. It's like a hobby thing. People look at it like, why should we support your hobby? And then I would say to you, I could lie to you and tell you, oh, this is my career, right? I do this as a living and I need money. I need you to fund my livelihood. I'm not blowing that smoke, okay?
There are people that try to be frauds and Jim's not that.
I listen, I've been honest since day one. This is my hobby. I have another way of making a living, okay? But sometimes that living has to be put on hold to do this. And when it's all going down, it's really expensive. And
$1,000 to $2,000 per chase, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, I have to shut everything down and get on the road. Lodging, food, odds and ends, equipment.
Something breaks, he's got to replace it.
Yep, transportation, the whole 9 yards. It's crazy. So, I'm not going to ever claim that I'm a professional meteorologist. I'm a forecaster. I'm none of those things. No. All I'm asking is for your help. Nobody's going to want to donate to us and say, well, why should we fund your hobby? So I'm asking you, look at the live video that we shot for 2 days in the Michael zone and draw your own conclusions, and then compare that to what everybody else did, privatizing everything, making people use passwords to go watch their live feed. We had 80,000 people watching our live feed. Nobody was paying for it. It was all free. So please, just help any way you can, and we'll keep covering these hurricanes like we've done for the past 15 to 20 years.
I mean, and that's That's one of the reasons Jim got out, and that's one of the reasons why we're going to continue to do it, is because if we do it ourselves, you don't have to ask permission to use others' videos, and you don't have to worry about the copyright crap, which if you look at all these videos online, not for broadcast, it's for monetary purposes only. Why the hell are you there?
They're there to sell their videos. They're there to sell it to the networks. And by the way, when I'm on the road, I never contact the Weather Channel. I don't contact CNN. All those media interviews on Hurricane City are all people that came to me. I didn't ask anybody to go on their television or radio stations. If people want to talk to us during the hurricane, contact us. You can contact Bill or myself, Bill at hurricanecity.com, Jim at hurricanecity.com. But we're never going to go, hey, we're going to sell you the video. Will you take $60 a second? I just don't do that. So we need you to fill the void. We're not trying to sell video. We're there to tell the story. And to give
if a media outlet wants to talk to us, we'll make sure that happens.
But that's not the reason we're out there at all. If it happens, that's fine, but that's not the reason we're out there at all, to turn $1 a profit. We're just out there to tell the story. So anyway, that's it. It's 9:45 Eastern time. Thank you for all the help this year, for the people that have watched on social networks, at Facebook, on Periscope. Spread the word. Tell everybody what we're doing. Have us follow us on social networks. And, I don't know if you're all praying people out there, but, Bill could use some prayers right now. He's got some medical issues he's dealing with. We're not going to get into the details with that, but hopefully everything's going to come out okay in the next month or so. And
surgery in a couple of weeks, but I'll be fine.
Yeah, we'll address that. Bill, we'll be back together working nice and strong next year and get all these hurricanes covered. I'm convinced it's going to be another barn burner year next year. So anyway, that's it for now. Thanks again, everybody, for spreading the word and supporting Hurricane City. And we'll see you on June 1st, Hurricane Season Kickoff Show, right here, June 1st, 8 p.m. We'll see what kind of season we're going to have next year. I'll have my predictions ready to go, and we'll see what happens. For Jim Williams, Bill, any final words?
Have a great night, ladies and gentlemen, and please support Hurricane City any way you can. Thank you, Jim, for another great season of work. Good night, everybody.
All right, good night. Thanks for watching, everybody.